It was a chilly October night when Mark Turner, a former paramedic turned podcaster, settled into his creaky leather chair with a steaming cup of coffee. He had turned his quiet rural home in Oregon into a recording studio, his voice reaching thousands every week through his podcast, Dark Echoes. But this week was different. This time, he had received a folder of handwritten accounts sent anonymously. The envelope read, "True stories, not for the faint of heart." Mark thought he had heard it all until he read them. What follows are his recordings, exactly as he read them that night. The first story came from a woman named Lisa Patterson, who grew up in a small town in Iowa. She wrote about an old farmhouse her family had moved into when she was 12. The place was isolated, surrounded by cornfields that seemed to whisper at night. Her parents had gotten the house cheap after the previous owners vanished without a trace. Her father thought they just packed up and left, but the townsfolk always looked uneasy when the topic came up. The house was strange from the beginning. The lights flickered often, even after her father replaced the wiring. She kept hearing scratching under the floorboards at night, and her dog Max refused to go upstairs. One night, while home alone, Lisa heard footsteps in the attic. Heavy, dragging steps. She called her mom, who told her to lock herself in the bathroom and wait until they got back. While she waited, she heard a muffled voice through the vent above her. It kept saying, "Come play with me." The attic was empty when her parents got home, but her mother noticed something chilling. Dusty footprints leading from the attic door to Lisa's bedroom. No one ever found out who or what had been up there, but they moved out within the month. Years later, she found out a young boy had died in the attic decades earlier, locked up and forgotten by an abusive stepfather. Mark took a breath, chilled by the tale despite the warm coffee in his hand. He moved on to the next letter. This one came from a man named Jacob Mitchell. He was a truck driver who had been on the road for more than 15 years. He wrote about a route he used to take through Arizona, late at night, through stretches of desert with nothing but stars above and silence all around. One evening around 3 a.m., while driving down Route 89, he saw a woman standing by the side of the road. She was barefoot, dressed in a tattered white gown, her hair covering her face. Thinking she might be in trouble, Jacob pulled over and called out. She didn't move, didn't speak, just pointed down the road. Confused, Jacob got back in the truck and kept driving. About a mile later, he saw a massive pileup, 2 trucks and a car, metal twisted and smoking. He called it in and waited for help. As emergency crews arrived, Jacob told them about the woman who'd pointed him that way. A paramedic paled and said, "You saw her too?" Turns out, several drivers over the years had reported the same woman right before they came upon crashes. Crashes she seemed to warn them about. No one knew who she was, but locals called her the Desert Bride. Jacob never drove that route again. The third story came from a college student named Emma Dawson, who had been attending school in Vermont. She worked late shifts at the library and often walked back to her dorm through a wooded trail behind the campus. One evening, after an especially late night organizing books, she took the path home. The woods were unusually quiet. No crickets, no owls. Just the crunch of her boots on the leaves. That's when she noticed something. A second set of footsteps, heavier than hers, always just a beat behind. She stopped. So did they. She turned around, no one. Heart pounding, she started walking faster. The footsteps followed. She broke into a run and only stopped when she saw the edge of the trail lit by the dorm lights. Behind her, the woods were still and black. She told her roommate, who brushed it off. But later that night, Emma found long, muddy fingerprints on their window, 3 stories up. Campus police never found anyone, but one officer said something odd. Decades ago, a man who lived in the woods nearby had stalked female students before disappearing into the forest. Some say he never left. Mark was beginning to feel uncomfortable. He looked around his dimly lit studio, half expecting to see something move. Shaking it off, he reached for the next story, written by a man named Ronald Westbrook, a retired military officer from Kentucky. Ronald's story began during his deployment overseas, but the truly haunting part started once he returned home. He moved into his late parents' cabin deep in the Appalachian woods, hoping for peace. But something followed him. He first noticed it during hunting season. Every time he went into the woods, he felt watched. He set up motion sensor cameras around his property. At first they picked up deer, foxes, raccoons, normal stuff. Then one night he caught something else. A tall, thin humanoid figure standing just outside the tree line. It had no face, just smooth skin stretched over bone. The next morning the camera was smashed. Ronald stayed awake with his rifle for 3 nights straight. On the 4th, he heard something tapping on the window. It wasn't a branch. He didn't sleep again for weeks. Eventually, he sold the cabin and moved to a busy suburb. He never told his family why. The 5th and final letter was the most disturbing of them all. It came from a nurse named Jessica Caldwell, who had worked the night shift at a care facility for Alzheimer's patients in Maine. She'd loved her job, until she was assigned to a patient named Henry. Henry was 89, quiet, and rarely spoke. But something about him gave her the creeps. He always seemed to know what time it was, even without clocks. He never slept. And worst of all, he always smiled, as if he knew something no one else did. One night, Jessica found him standing in the hallway, staring at the security camera. She asked if he needed help, but he simply said, "They're coming through again." Before she could respond, the hallway lights flickered and went out. The building plunged into darkness. She grabbed her flashlight and went to check the breaker. On the way, she passed Henry's room and found another Henry sitting in the bed, eyes open. Identical. She ran back to the hallway. The first Henry was gone. When the lights came back, only one was left. But which one? She never found out. The facility never reported the incident, but Jessica quit the next day. Sometimes, she said, she still dreams of that hallway, and both Henrys staring at her. Mark turned off the recorder and sat in silence. The coffee had gone cold. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. He thought he saw movement by the window but shook it off. Just a trick of the light. But when he checked the front door an hour later, there were muddy footprints, leading up to the porch and stopping right outside the door. He never recorded another episode again.